Hey everyone, thanks for purchasing this tutorial. My name is Phil Stoltz, and in this tutorial series, I'm going to be talking about how I sculpt tiling textures inside of ZBrush. There's a couple of different things that I want to cover in this tutorial. I want to kind of cover how you can utilize a single sculpt to create multiple textures. I want to discuss different types of layering that you can do within a tiling texture to give it some three-dimensionality because I know that you can get that inside of Substance Designer. And when I first started using ZBrush to do my tiling textures, I thought it was kind of limited, but that was just because I didn't have I had a lack of understanding of how I could really use the software to my advantage. So that's those are some of the things that I want to discuss while we're doing this. So here's some of the reference that I gathered. And I thought that this would be really good to really drive home some of the points that I'm going to be trying to make with using ZBrush. And I chose these specifically because, yes, it is brick. I know that we see a lot of brick textures as environment artists, but I think that this is just really going to be helping me to demonstrate how I can use different layers to achieve like a really convincing and realistic looking tiling texture. And you can see like there's a lot of plaster. Like this is really damaged and old, and it's the plaster's on top of the brick. And in some of these references right here, we have some bricks that are missing. They've probably fallen out because they're pretty old, or they were pulled out, and some of these are damaged, which I really like. There's a close-up shot here. So these all provide like a nice variety of interesting shapes, some really cool like texture variants, and so that's what we're going to be sculpting. And as always, I have my reference on my other monitor, so as I'm sculpting and doing this, sometimes I'll bring the reference back and show you if I'm trying to make a point, but I do have this up on my monitor so you know that I'm not just making this up. All right, so starting out, I'm sure some of you noticed that I have this tiling plane here inside of ZBrush. This is something that I ended up making myself, and I will be providing this with the tutorial video so you can use this as well. But it's a really handy thing. It's basically a plane that I made inside of Maya, and the area that's in the 0 to 1 space is right where this sort of like these triangle edges are. And everything outside of it is basically going to be wrapping around and tiling around it. And it's really useful for doing any sort of like organic kind of sculpting. Also, I always use this when I'm doing bricks or stones or anything like that because the distance between these two corners here and here where the square is, it's 4 meters across and 4 meters down, which is usually like that's a standard size for a texture if you're doing 512 per meter texture, which is an industry standard right now. So I just use that to, sort of help guide me and know like how big my textures are. But I'm not going to be worrying about that too much here because I'm trying to, just focus on the actual sculpt itself and sort of like the layering that we're going to be, achieving here. So yeah, so I will be providing this, so don't worry about that. It will require you to basically set all of your brushes to wrap mode down here to 1. And if you don't know how to access that, I'll go ahead and close this. It's in your brush tab. So if you go up at the top here and you see brush, you can dock this to the side. And if you scroll down, if you go to curve, open that up, by default, this will be set to 0. So you'll want to set that to 1. Now this is like a very important step because if you don't have it set, I can actually demonstrate this right now. Just grab the damn standard brush here. So right now it's set to 0, and I'm going to go ahead and give this square some subdivisions. Let's actually go back. I want to smooth this out really quick. All right, so with a wrap mode set to 0, and I just go ahead and start making marks, you can see that it's not actually tiling across, which is obviously we don't want that because we want our meshes to tile. So if we go ahead and set that to 1, and we start making a mark, you'll notice you start to see everything that I do on this side, it's happening on this side. So same with up here, right? So anything that's within inside this box, this is basically like the 0 to 1 space of the texture. So you'll see that like I'll get a repeat on this side just a little bit, but if I cross this edge, it's going to go on this edge. So that's just basically, it's one of the most, simple things to use when doing tiling textures in ZBrush. So I highly recommend that you use this, or something equivalent to this. Now I do want to mention that when I am doing my tiling textures, something that is really helpful for me is to use a scale reference. And I can do that by just going to, I'm actually going to create, I'm just creating a terrain because I'm going to import something, and that's going to take whatever place of subtool I have. So if I import my male reference, I just set them aside here. You can see like that's a lot of space, if that's going to be the size of a texture. And this is roughly about 6 feet for what this the human scale is going to be. Now, the reason I do that is because it helps with when I start doing details and I start, chipping things or adding, finite details or even the size of objects, right? Like you want to make them pretty relevant to the size of a human. Um, and now this isn't the case all the time because sometimes you make textures that aren't necessarily to scale, and then you just tile them inside of, Unreal or something. But for the, purposes of the demo, I'm gonna probably not be using this because I'm just more focused on, like the actual how-to instead of, making textures for, games or whatever specific reason. So I'm gonna go ahead and just delete this. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna pull the ref back here. One of the things I'm going to start is I'm going to actually just start doing some bricks. I'm going to create a cube and I'm going to basically turn it into a brick shape, and I'm going to go ahead and like lay them out first. That's going to be the first step that we take. Because if you don't have something properly laid out and you start sculpting on it, you'll run into an error where things don't start to line up the way you want them to. And then you'll basically have to, squish and, stretch all of the sculpts that you just did, and you probably won't want to do that. So how I will typically start is I'll just go to append, and I'll just append a cube 3D. And let's go ahead and we'll shrink this down a bit. Turn this into a sort of a brick shape. Something like that. So when you're doing this, it's really important to take note of these edges, because when you're laying these out, if you lay out anything that is within the bounds of our border, then you don't really have to worry about it too much because you don't have to worry about it tiling over onto the other side. But if you have something that's crossing over this line, like this, right, then you're going to want to make sure that it's on this side as well. And same goes for the top side. If I have anything that's crossing over this top line right here, and the line that I'm referring to, if I can go ahead and just do this, is these bounds right here. This, just like this, right? So anything that is within here, you don't have to worry about it because it's not going to tile over the edges. Now, let's go ahead and close this. So if I were to place something, let's say I just place something right here, well, then it has to be on this side too, right? Because when it comes time to frame everything up, it needs to repeat onto this side. So there's a couple of things that you can do. The easiest way is to basically hold shift, and if you take your manipulator and you just drag it, actually I'm going to duplicate the stone or the brick by hitting Control Shift D. And what I can do is hold down Shift, and with this particular frame mesh right here that we're using, if you just hold Shift and drag over, you see the numbers that are right below that, the blue manipulator. So if we drag this over, we want this to be, we want it to say 2. 2 is basically, it's been moved over 2 times, which is exactly where we want it to be on this side. All right, so if I undo that, the other way you can do it is if you go down and go to deformation. And if you see this offset right here, and you have this X, Y, and Z, the X is going to be obviously on the X axis. So if I go ahead and just move this over, you see the number that's down by the manipulator, see how it's going from 0 to 100? So this is basically like 100 units this way, which would be like pretty much in the center. And if we go ahead and let go and we do it again, another 100, totaling 200, there's that 2 again. This is the same as if we were to, move it with the manipulator tool. I personally prefer just using this because it's a lot faster. You don't have to actually use a bar, but this is nice because if you were to, just over, now it's perfectly where it needs to be. So let me go ahead and I'm going to delete that subtool. Now, if you have a, whatever it is, if you have an asset that is on all 4 corners, like up here, well, that just means that it needs to go in every single corner on the screen. So if you just hit Control-Shift-D, again, using this and holding Shift, grabbing the down arrow, and we'll just move this down until it says 2, right, just like this. Control-Shift-D again, over this side, make sure it says 2, and same thing. So now each and every one of these is tiling, right? All right, so what we're gonna want to do now is, since we're doing brick, I'm gonna go ahead and make sure that I can get this brick to be the exact size that we want, because it's not gonna be an issue tiling from left to right, because what I'll do is, like I just did, is I'll tile this brick onto this side, and then I'll just tend to fit whatever size bricks that I want in between, because the sizes here don't matter. Now, what I don't know is how many bricks it's going to take to evenly fill up the top and bottom. So to do that, you either could do this inside of Max, Maya, Blender. It doesn't really matter to get you started. If you're just doing it in ZBrush, it does take just a little bit of guesswork. So let's go ahead and we will go ahead and just start this, and I'm gonna hit Control-Shift-D. We'll go ahead and move this down. Now, I don't really care that if it's offset yet because I'm just trying to get the space. And I also want to leave enough space for there to be some mortar sticking through here. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I give it just a little bit of room. And then just repeat the process. Now, because I'm going to go ahead and leave this brick where it is, I know that this brick needs to be basically down here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Control-Shift-D again and bring it all the way back down. And then we'll just continue on. So this is kind of what I'm talking about, right? Where if you don't plan ahead, that you will basically end up with something that looks kind of like this, and this is not what you want to run into when you are, um, halfway through if you're sculpting and then you have this space, you basically have to go back and plan out the spacing of this again. So I'm going to go ahead and reshape one of these bricks, and maybe what I could do actually, since that's quite a bit of space, I'm going to go ahead and just go and take each one of these and inch them up just a little bit, and I think by the time I get to this brick, that'll be enough space to where I can just insert one more brick. So if I just do that again, not yeah, I think that works. Okay, so next in preparing for getting the layout done, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to start, and I'm going to go ahead and offset some of these. So just like you see with our brick patterns, actually I'll pull that up here, is that the bricks are usually offset, right? So you have if I can draw on it, you have one brick right here, and then another brick is about, a third of the way below this one right here. This one's in the center, and then again, so they're usually offset. So that's what we're gonna aim for here. So just trying to offset these a little bit. I'm gonna make sure that no brick actually lines up with another one, because I've found, since I've done a lot of these, um, if you do that, you can really just look and see the tiling or like the repeat, and that's not something that we really want here. So now that we have them offset right here, what we can do is actually, you know what? We'll actually go through and let's scale some of these just a little bit. Okay, so just like we did with before, you can notice that all of these are basically on the right on the offset of this line right here. So that just means that we need to make sure that these bricks are on that side. So I'm going to go ahead and Control Shift D, scoot this over here. I'm going to go ahead and do the same to the top and to the rest. Okay, so now we have our offset tiled from left to right. So we know that this is going to tile. So now basically anything, we still have this this top row that we want to do, which will come down on the bottom row. So let's go ahead and just make sure that we leave some room for the grout, the mortar, and we'll just sort of get our design in here. Now this is where it's kind of fun. You can start to, scale some of these bricks, maybe shrink them down just like a little bit so they're a little bit different. All right, so now I know that because I crossed the top edge, these 3 bricks I just created need to come down here. So again, same thing. It becomes very easy. You kind of get it after a while. So you'll notice that even though I'm setting all this up, this part is really just making sure that it tiles correctly. But you'll notice further on down the video that, um, you know, you don't have to sculpt this top row twice, right? Or this row here. What I typically like to do is I will just I'll sculpt this, the top row, and I'll sculpt this left side. And then those bricks are going to be obviously repeated. So, those are already done. So it saves some time, which is really nice. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and speed up this part of the video because it's just going to be, me laying out some of the bricks along here and getting all of those set up. So basically just doing everything that I've been talking about. So now that we have our brick pattern laid out, what we can do is we can test this to make sure that it's actually tiling and not just going off by what I say, right? We want to actually make sure that this can actually tile. So in order to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and set our canvas size to be, we'll set it to 2048 by 2048, right? Like the standard, tiling texture size. So we'll go up to Document. We'll go ahead and set our width to 2048. We'll actually check off this Pro, and we'll set this to 2048. Enter, and go ahead and hit Resize. It'll ask you if you'd like to resize it that it's undoable. We'll go ahead and say yes. Now if you hit Control N, that'll clear the canvas, and we'll just click and drag out again. and hit edit. Okay, so to actually be able to see the 2K by 2K size, we'll go ahead and we'll hit this AA half. And it's hard to see on my screen, but basically the bounds of the texture are about right here. All right, so next what we'll do is kind of zoom this in a bit, and you want to select the border, right? Those four-cornered border pieces that we have in here. And if you can't actually see them because the geo's on top, if you just scroll up here, this the actual like border pieces up here will be selected. So these are what we want. Now it's really important to not actually manipulate these in any way because this is a perfect square, and we want to use this to basically size up our texture to the canvas. We want to frame it to it. So we can do that if it's perfectly, facing, the planes are facing us. So if it's tilted like this, you just want to make sure that you hold and shift and snap it. And then if you go ahead and hit F once and then hit F again, that will completely frame this to the canvas because it's a perfect square. So now if we go ahead and if we hide this, we'll hide that, and then we'll go ahead and uncheck solo, and then we'll click off of this, click off of the border. So now we have our brick texture lined up perfectly to the canvas. And to actually see if it's tiling or not, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we'll click off of edit. It's going to ask if you want to switch to 2.5D mode, and we're going to go ahead and just say always switch for now because we might do this a couple of times. Now, next, what you want to do is you want to click and hold the tilde key, and go ahead and click and hold this. And then we're just going to go ahead and left click and drag on our screen here. Now, this allows us to basically go through, and as long as I'm holding tilde, I can cycle through and look at the texture. And as I'm doing this, what I'm looking for are seams, right? I'm looking for anything that is, kind of jumping off the screen here at me. And right now I'm not seeing anything, but let's go ahead and let's make an error, right? And we'll be able to see what it looks like if something's off. And I make mistakes all the time. Pretty sure I made one within the last week when I was doing this. So it is always good to check because even I make mistakes doing this. So let's say that we were tiling over a couple of these and we thought it said 2 when we were moving it, but it didn't. So let's move it this way a little bit. And then let's just move it up just a little bit. And we'll do it to this one as well. So maybe we accidentally shrunk it too, right? Maybe it's shrunk a little bit, then we moved it, right? Now let's go ahead and I'll repeat the same process over to go ahead and frame it. So now if I hold tilde and I start looking around, oh, you notice right away something's off, right? So you'll see a piece right here is clipping weirdly, right? It's not lined up properly. So this is basically what you can expect to see. If you keep cycling through, you'll see it again. This is what you can expect to see if something is not lined up right. And believe me, I have gotten all the way to the very end of the process where the sculpt is completed, and I took it all the way into Photoshop to start, editing my maps, and I noticed this, and this is not what you want. So always make sure to check and make sure that the sculpt and the assets are all lined up the way they should be. Okay, so the next thing that we want to do is we can go ahead and get rid of the bricks that we know we're going to go ahead and sculpt once, and then we're going to duplicate them over. So that'll be all the bricks on the right side, the ones on the bottom, right? Because if I sculpt this one is on the corner here, it's going to go to all the corners, so I don't need that. So we'll go ahead and let's just go ahead and delete. There we go, just like that. So now I know, when I start to sculpt these, I know that I don't actually, need to do any of these, which is really helpful. Next, what we can do is we can sort of start to give these the bricks some shape, right? We can give them some variety, even more than what we were doing before. And it's really important to do it at this stage because anything that you do to any of these end bricks, like if you decide to rotate them or like move them up and down, which is what we're gonna do, you're gonna have to do to this side. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so let's go ahead and maybe like push some of these in. And I'm literally just gonna choose at random. Not gonna really give this one too much thought, although I will want to make sure like I don't do too many of them because then it starts to repeat. So, the idea of this is, when it comes time to baking out your maps and you start to think about, if you're going to be blending this inside of Unreal with vert painting, that I'm generating out a really good height map. And that's always a good idea to think about. And I like to do this in stages, right? So I'll push all of them down in one stage. And then in my second stage, let's go through and we'll give a little bit of tilt. Not a lot, but on some of these, we're going to go ahead and just start to think about tilting them a little bit. Again, see, that's only like 4.5, 5 degrees. You don't need much. You start doing a lot, then it starts to become really obvious. And the whole trick of this is to, make it so you give a little bit of variety without, making it so obvious to where, the viewer can obviously tell that it's tiling. This is something you can do as well. Like right now, it's a pretty flat color to be staring at, and it's kind of hard to see like which bricks you've manipulated. So something you can do is you can go up to your light up here, and let's go ahead and just kind of tilt this at a 3/4 angle. And then we can go to our render settings. Let's go to our BPR shadow, and we'll change the raise to 100, the resolution to 1000, the angle to 120. We'll go ahead and hit enter. And then let's just go ahead and we'll hit BPR. Okay, so what I'm kind of looking at here, and maybe we can change the angle. Let's go ahead and adjust the light. Maybe it's too much. What I'm looking at is like how the shadows are being cast over everything. And now you can kind of see the bricks that were pushed in. You can start to see the bricks that are tilted a little bit. And like right now I'm noticing this one right here is probably tilted and pushed in too much because it's standing out too much to me. So let's go ahead and we'll just push this one back. This will be also really helpful for when we do the grout later on. And at any stage really, you can adjust these and you can make them however unique you want them to be. But it's just good. Like I like this process because it's just it keeps everything in check for me when I'm like, okay, well, before I start sculpting, I want to just make sure I can get some interest out of these, make them somewhat interesting before I even start taking my brush to them. Okay, yeah, I'm pretty happy with this. I think one thing I'm going to do, I think this brick is standing out too much because it's too small. So maybe just make that a little bit longer. I'm just going to go ahead and like maybe adjust some of these so that way the gap between each of these is a little bit different. Not a whole lot, but enough. All right, so that is looking pretty good. So I think, all right, so this is looking pretty good for our layout. Now, I know I mentioned, using ZBrush for a lot of layering. That's going to come later on in the video. I'm going to kind of build this up in stages. And so, the plan is to basically, we'll go ahead and sculpt the bricks, then we'll do the grout, then we'll do some plaster layering on top of that. And we'll just kind of build it up layer by layer until we get to the finished result.